Excuse me. I'm having an issue. I don't need to. Your way. Oh, shit.
Hello, I'm Kelli Cox, and this is Bryan Cumming over here, and welcome to another edition of Jazz from Home. We are actually having jazz in Bryan's studio right now, but we are so happy that Lori and Roger asked us to do this, and we hope that you will not only learn something, but enjoy the music tonight. Did you know that this month, on August 18th, is the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment for women's right to vote? So we decided that we would put together a show that not only talked about the voting, those women had actually worked for over 100 years to get the right to vote. And obviously many things got in the way, the Civil War being a big thing. And when the Civil War happened, then they were trying to make it become universal voting for everybody, for black people and white people and women and everybody. But unfortunately, that didn't work out, but they kept pushing and pushing. And President Woodrow Wilson was in power at the time, really close to this time, and pretty much knew that he was going to have difficulty with his presidency. These women gained so much power that they knew that they could make it difficult on him and he would not be elected president. So there were many women musicians during this time period. Up until this point, it had basically been all men doing stuff. And about the teens and the 20s, it was the beginning of the flapper age, and they were trying to loosen some of the boundaries that were put on women and allow women to be able to do jobs and things that before had been thought inappropriate. So we wanted to talk about some of the prominent women musicians during this time period. We're going to give you a little information on them, and then we're going to play some too for you. So I would like to talk about Bessie Smith. I'm sure she's somebody that you've heard of, a wonderful blues singer. She was known as the Empress of the Blues. She was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee in 1892. Her parents both died when she was very young, and so her older sister had to take care of her, and consequently she never did end up having a formal education because they were so poor. But she had an amazing musical education. Everybody in her family was very musical. She had a guitar playing brother that they would go out on the street corner and she would sing and dance and he would play guitar, and they would help raise money to feed their family. Her oldest brother had an audition with the Stokes troupe and ended up getting in with them, and that was a big entertainment troupe, and they toured all around the country. And he made sure a few years later when they came back through Chattanooga that he arranged an audition for Bessie, and she actually ended up getting hired through them. But she was hired as a dancer because Ma Rainey, the famous blues singer, was already singing with them. So she didn't take lessons from Ma, but she definitely learned things like stage presence and how to carry herself. That helped her because she started auditioning for the Theater Owners Booking Association, and she became very popular with them. That was a bunch of theaters owned by a bunch of different independent black operators who owned these theaters, and they would send entertainment around the country and mostly in the South. But she did very, very well. And she came into age about the time that radio was really getting going. And so that really worked in her favor. She actually ended up recording over 160 records with Columbia and ended up developing an audience in black and white. And it really made her popular So she got to record with some of the best musicians of her day, such as Louis Armstrong, Tommy Dorsey, Coleman Hawkins, and many others. And she was even a star in one movie. Her best known song was St. Louis Blues, which the movie was St. Louis Blues. And we know that's a tune by W.C. Handy, but she ended up having the defining version of her day. Her career was cut a little short by the Depression, but before that happened, she became the highest paid black entertainer of the time and did so well that she was able to travel in her own rail car everywhere she went. It's not bad for somebody with no formal education. She was critically injured in a terrible accident in September of 1937 between Memphis and Clarksdale, Mississippi, and did not survive that. Her arm was severed and she lost a lot of blood and did not make it. And the craziest thing was she was buried in Philadelphia, but they had left her ex-husband in charge of trying to put the headstone up for her grave, and people raised money so that she could have a proper burial and headstone, and he stole the money not once but twice. So guess that's why she ended up leaving him way before that. But she was in an unmarked grave all the way up until 1970. But she had influenced so many singers, one of them being Janis Joplin, who raised the money along with her former childhood housekeeper, Juanita Green. She was Bessie Smith's family's childhood housekeeper, and they ended up putting a formal gravestone in her place. So she got her proper burial. Now you can go visit her in Philadelphia if you'd like to. We would love to play her most famous song for you, St. Louis Blues. Bryan Cumming. He is such a fabulous, talented musician. I think a lot of people don't know about Bryan. He plays guitar, he plays saxophone, he plays many other things. He plays flute, he plays clarinet. He sings incredibly well. He'll be doing some of that later for you. He plays bass. He just does everything, but he's playing a little cornet for us on this next song, which I've never even heard him play cornet, so we're going to get a real treat here. We're going to first talk about Lil Hardin is our next person that we're going to talk about, but then we'll be playing some music for you. Our next person to talk about is Lil Hardin. I'm sure that most of you have heard of her, as she is best known for being Louis Armstrong's second wife, but she has quite a history herself. She was born in Memphis, Tennessee, on February 3rd, 1898. She is known as a composer, an arranger, a pianist, and a band leader. And one interesting thing is she first started taking lessons from her third grade piano teacher, but her parents wanted her to have a formal music education, and she ended up going to Fisk University here in Nashville. Once she graduated from there, her parents had moved to Chicago, so she moved to Chicago with them, and she got a job as a sheet music demonstrator, but right away was heard by a band leader named Dewey, and he pulled her away. He was excited because she played well, but she could read and understand music, and no one else in that band could. And so it was kind of frustrating for her. So she soon switched to King Oliver's Creole Band. She played at a place called Dreamland in Chicago, and she started off with Dewey's band, and then they played for 6 months, and then King Oliver was brought in, and he heard her play and asked her to stay and play with his band. So she did, and she enjoyed that a lot more because they were much better educated musicians. And they went out to California to play, and then she stayed, and then came back, and the second time that he was there, he called Louis Armstrong to come play with them. And all the guys in King Oliver's band had been trying to start a relationship with her, and she wasn't interested. But then Louis Armstrong came along. And the funny thing is, she didn't like him at first. She thought he was a real country bumpkin. She was a real classy dresser and was a big Chicago city lady. And she thought he was super country looking, didn't like his hair, didn't like the way he dressed, all that. But they ended up striking up a great friendship and getting married. And so she was actually the one instrumental in getting Louis classical lessons. She pushed him to become his own band leader and take charge of his own career and not be just a sideman. And they were married for about, not quite 10 years, but he kept having affairs on her, and so they separated. They didn't actually officially divorce until 1938, but in 1929, she left and went to New York University and got a master's degree, which was quite an accomplishment for a lady at that point. She had her own all-girl band in the 30s and played for lots of acts. She led an NBC radio band. She performed as a jazz vocalist and still sometimes played with King Oliver. And she mostly played solo piano in later years. She tried to actually leave the music business and become a tailor. She had taken a class and she was very good, but her first assignment was to make a tuxedo for Louis Armstrong. And she actually did really fine work, and people always really enjoyed the clothes that she made, but everywhere she went, they asked her to play piano for them. So she just figured out, okay, I'm not getting out of the music business. So she went back into it and decided that she would finish out that way. So she had decided to write her memoirs, and then she was afraid that maybe some of the stuff that she said would hurt Louis's reputation or just hurt him a little bit, so she decided to hold off. But then he ended up dying. Louis Armstrong died in 1971, so she decided to resume writing her memoirs and thought she would publish a book, and actually she ended up having a heart attack on stage a month later after he died, so she never got them quite finished. But we decided that we would play probably her most famous composition, which is called Struttin' with Some Barbecue. So we hope that you enjoy this, and this is where you get to see Bryan, and I get to see Bryan play cornet for the first time. Do-ba-do-ba-do. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. So the next person that we'd like to talk about is a lady that I had never even heard of before I did this project, and it's a lady called Valaida Snow. And amazingly enough, she was a wonderful trumpet player. They actually nicknamed, W.C. Handy nicknamed her Little Louie because she sounded so much like Louis Armstrong, or the Queen of the Trumpet. She also was born in Tennessee. So Tennessee was quite a happening place back then, I guess. She was born in Chattanooga in 1904. And her father had a show business troupe called the Pickaninny Troubadours. I thought that was such a funny name. But and her mother was a music teacher and taught her how to play like every instrument out there: trumpet, clarinet, saxophone, cello, violin, bass, guitar, on and on. She could sing, she could dance, do all kinds of stuff. And she actually ended up doing a lot of those things in her career. But when she was 22, she decided to focus more on singing and dancing and playing the trumpet. So she ended up doing some shows, went to Chicago, did a show with Josephine Baker, and received very favorable reviews there. And Louis Armstrong had seen some of her reviews that she put together herself, and Earl Father Hines too as well really loved her singing and dancing and trumpet playing. And Louis Armstrong said that she was the best show that he'd ever seen. So anyway, she just really struggled still to book her own stuff because she wasn't like Lil Hardin. I mean, Bessie Smith was a singer, and at that time that was a little more acceptable. And Lil Hardin was a piano player in Louis' band. I mean, obviously she did lots of other things, but Valaida was playing trumpet, which was obviously considered a very male instrument, and she was trying to book her own things and be her own artist, and so she had a much more difficult time. She actually had her greatest success in the 1930s when she recorded a song called Hi-Hat, Rhythm, and Trumpet, and she toured in London and Paris and the Far East, Jakarta and China and all that, and she was much, much more successful there. She actually happened to be in Copenhagen during World War II, and the Nazis took her as a prisoner of war and kept her in a camp and really, really abused her terribly. She ended up finally being released in 1942, but she just never recovered from her ordeal, and she never regained her success. She died of a brain hemorrhage in 1956, just before her 52nd birthday. And no recordings were ever released of her in the United States. There are some now on YouTube for you to check out, but nobody knew about her that much in the United States because she had so much better of a career in Europe. And she was actually credited with being one of the musicians who made jazz so popular in Europe. But we thought we would do a song now for you, her hit, Hi-Hat, Rhythm, and Trumpet. So hope you enjoy this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Swing then, I got my hi-hat, trumpet, and rhythm, and I'm ready to swing. So the last person that I would like to talk about is Mary Lou Williams, which is probably somebody that you all have heard of. I didn't know a whole lot about her. I mean, I definitely heard of her, but I learned a lot more by studying about her. She was born in Atlanta in 1910, but she was raised in Pittsburgh. Her family moved to Pittsburgh. So she started playing at 3 years old and taught herself how to play. So she's one of those. And it helped her out because her family faced a lot of racism in Pittsburgh. And so when people started figuring out she could play piano, her neighbors started having her play for parties. So when she was 6 years old, she started doing that, and she was making money to help support her 10 half-brothers and sisters. So at age 12, she went on the Orpheum circuit. And at 13, she played with Louis Armstrong, and later on she played with Duke Ellington, and later on played with Louis Armstrong. So, she did pretty well for herself. At 17, she got married to John Overton Williams, and she moved to Memphis, and she played with her husband's band there. And when he decided to go on the road with somebody else, she ended up taking over that band and played and directed and wrote charts for them and did all that until her husband ended up moving to Oklahoma with another band, and she ended up going there. And when he moved to Oklahoma and played with that band, she didn't even end up playing in the band. She was moving bodies around for a funeral home to make money. So, but then they ended up needing her to write, so she started writing for a lot of charts for his band, and then she started writing charts for people like Earl Hines and Benny Goodman and others, and she wrote a huge hit called Roll 'Em for Benny Goodman, and he loved it so much that he wanted to employ her as his writer and nobody else. He wanted to put her under contract, but she preferred to freelance. So once again, as the story seems to be with all these women, she and her husband divorced. They had marital issues and all that. So she ended up moving back to Pittsburgh. And there was a trumpet player that had played in the band, Howard Shorty Baker, that she decided to marry. But that didn't even last a year. It just ended really quickly. So she ended up just playing around Pittsburgh and ended up meeting lots of bebop musicians such as Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker, Art Blakey, and many others. And so she had a great education playing with them, and actually she was the older of them, so she taught them quite a lot of stuff. But she ended up playing so much. She was traveling to Europe. She was doing all kinds of things. She got incredibly burnt out, and she converted to Catholicism and just backed away from music for a while. And then finally they convinced her that she could do good for God and still play, and so she ended up coming back and playing. But she did a lot of generous, wonderful things with her life. She ended up starting a thrift store in New York that specifically helped musicians. She donated 10% of all her income to help struggling musicians. And she was profoundly hurt by Charlie Parker's death because they had been close. And I think that was part of the reason that she was trying to do so many things to help other musicians. Once she came back from her hiatus of playing, she kind of recorded more jazz hymns and suites. And eventually, as she got older, she played again with, there's a famous concert of her with Benny Goodman and people like that. But mostly her music took on a more serious approach as she got older. And she died of bladder cancer in North Carolina at age 71 in 1981. But she was one of the most respected and influential women in jazz. She helped open the door for many, many women to follow. They have the Mary Lou Williams piano competition. She was an artist in residence at several schools. She did all kinds of things that a lot of women did not have the chance to do. So we're all very appreciative of Mary Lou Williams. And now we're going to try to play Roll 'Em. She had better chops than I do, but we're going to make it happen. I hope you've enjoyed learning about some of these amazing women, just like I enjoyed learning about them. Now we thought we would just have a little fun and play a few songs that were popular back in the 20s in this era. So we're going to feature Bryan Cumming on this one, and he's going to do that great old standard Back Home in Indiana.
You ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Back home again in Indiana, and it seems like I can see the gleaming candlelight still shining bright through those sycamores for me. The new mown hay sends all its fragrance through those fields where I used to roam. Ba-ba-da-ba-da. When I dream about the magic on the Wabash, that's when I long for my Indiana home. Come on now, Bryan. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba. Ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba-da-ba-da-ba. Come on, y'all. The gleaming candlelight still shining bright through those sycamores for me. The new mown hay sends all its fragrance through those fields where I used to roam. Ba-ba-da-ba-da. So now I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash. That's when I long for my Indiana home. Let's say it again. When I dream about the moonlight on the Wabash, that's when I dream about my Indiana home.
We thought we'd do one last popular song of the 20s, and this is one of the most well-known songs that 1 million people have recorded, so we hope you enjoy It Had to Be You. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found somebody who could make me be true, could make me be blue, or even be glad just to be sad thinking of you. Some others I've seen might never be me, might never be boss or try to be cross, but they wouldn't do, for nobody else gives me hope that you have enjoyed listening to the music of the 1920s and learning more about suffrage. I tried to find some actual suffrage music, and I could find lyrics, but I couldn't find any audio. So we thought it would be fun to just finish. You might remember this song from Schoolhouse Rock, and we hope that you enjoy this. It's called Suffering Through Suffrage.
Now you have heard of women's rights and how we tried to reach new heights. If we're all created equal, that's us too. But you will probably not recall that it's not been too long at all since we even had the right to cast the vote. Well, some men bowed down and called us missus. Let us hang the wash out and wash the dishes. But when the time came around to elect the president, what did they say, sister? See you later, alligator. And don't forget my mashed potatoes, 'cause I'm going downtown to cast my vote for president. Oh, we were suffering till suffrage. Not a woman here could vote no matter what age. Then the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. And now we pull down on the lever, cast our votes, and we endeavor to improve our country, state, county, town, and school. Those pilgrim women who braved the boat could cook the ticket, but they could not vote. Even Betsy Ross, who sold the flag, was left behind that first election day. Now Susan B. Anthony and Julie Howe, Lucretia Mott, and showed us how they carried signs and marched the line until at last the law was passed. Oh, we were suffering till suffrage. Not a woman here could vote no matter what age. Then the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. And now we pull down on the lever, cast our ballots, and we endeavor to improve our country, state, county, town, and school. Now the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. Yeah, the 19th Amendment struck down that restrictive rule. Since 1920, sisters unite. Vote yeah.
All right, sis.
Yes.
Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, Nashville Jazz Workshop, for having us. This is the wonderful Alison Brazil, our special guest. Bryan Cumming, who you've heard from the whole video, and I'm Kelli Cox. And we've really enjoyed doing this for you. So thanks again and have a great day.